Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to do a recommendation video for wintry and Christmas themed horror and thriller books. This is a video that I do every year, and so if you want even more recommendations, I do have a playlist linked down below and in the cards. And I should mention before I get started that because I do this every year, I've already covered a lot of the really popular books that are out there. So for instance, if you're looking for Nosferatu or The Terror, I probably already talked about it. So usually I get 1,000 comments saying, where is this book, where is that one? So go check out the whole list. But here I'm back with new recommendations, some by new authors, some by older authors that I've read before and have recommended and have new books to add to the list. All that being said, if you love wintry horror as much as I do, if you're looking for something to curl up with around a fireplace during the cold months of the year, which if you live in Canada is pretty much 8 months of the year, so hopefully you find something to enjoy here. All that being said, let's get started. First off, let's talk about some Arctic horror, and that is All the White Places by Ali Wilkes. And this is a story that is a piece of historical horror, so it's set in the past, and we follow a young person who finds out right at the beginning of the story that their two brothers have died in the war. Their mother is distraught, and they decide to go off and forge their own adventures. So they go off on a ship and they dress like a male in order to sneak off onto the ship. You find out that this is not just simply a gender swap story, but actually a trans story that is told through a historical lens. And in the story, they of course go on the ship to the cold Arctic winter, and the story goes from there. This is a horror story, but I will be honest that it is very, very slow moving, and the horror aspects don't really jump off until the later part of the story. Instead, the beginning is much more character driven. And so if you love those aspects of the story, if you love an Arctic setting, this is one you may want to check out. You may really enjoy, but I will admit it's a little bit slow for my pace. It's a very long book, and you do have to work to get to the really creepy parts. But once you get there, they're pretty great. So hopefully you'll enjoy this one. Next up, if you're looking for a good old survival story, I would recommend The Hollows by Daniel Church. This is a story that follows a town where they know that a snowstorm, a blizzard, is coming in, and soon the constable discovers that there is a body and there's something just not quite right going on. There's perhaps something more supernatural afoot, and we follow the town as they are trying to survive this incoming blizzard. This, I will be honest, is a very classic survival story that has a cold weather aspect to it. I've read a lot of books like this and recommend them in the past. Again, they're probably in my other videos if you want to go check those out. So this one doesn't necessarily bring anything that I've never seen done before, but if you really enjoy characters trying to survive, the cold weather aspect, the storm coming in, this would be a really nice one to read on a blizzarding day. I do think it's best to read in the winter. And the characters aren't necessarily the most likable people, but I feel like that's kind of half the fun when it comes to survival horror, is just the enjoyment of seeing people potentially get knocked off or not. And I'll let you experience that for yourself. Next up, we have The Snowman by Jo Nesbø, and this is a Scandinavian story. It's actually a later book in the story involving Harry Holmes, who is the main detective, but it really is a companion series, so you definitely can start here. This is where I started with this author. And within the story, the idea is that there is a person, a woman, who disappears from her house, is perceived to be kidnapped or killed by the serial killer, and you know that it was the serial killer because in her place there is a snowman that is left on the front lawn as a marker. And so we follow the main character of Harry Holmes as he tries to investigate it. And I will be honest that in terms of the story, it is a very straightforward police procedural, definitely in the Scandinavian style where it's very gritty and dark. So in terms of, again, a story I've never seen before, I don't necessarily describe this book as being revolutionary, but if you're looking for a chilling story, I do think that Scandinavian thrillers and mysteries is the way to go. Again, they're just written to be a little bit more gruff, and you also get a lot of the atmosphere of the time period and the place, and I thought that this one just had some really interesting elements. I am really fascinated by a lot of these countries, and so I love getting kind of a little bit of insight into the darker aspects of their culture. So not my favorite of these books I'm going to recommend here, but I know a lot of people that love it simply because they love the serial killer genre a little bit more than I do. Next up, we have Bone Road by Christopher Golden, and this is a horror story that follows a group that are traveling along this road in Russia that is known for being constructed by these workers who, when they died during the terrible conditions, they were buried underneath the road. And that is the actual historical background behind the road that actually does exist in Russia. And so Christopher Golden went and turned it into a horror story. So we have this group traveling along on this cold, icy road, and things start to go horribly horribly wrong. This one is very fast-paced, it's very simple and straightforward. It's a relatively short book in terms of page length, and it's one that I like. It kind of follows a lot of the similar tropes when it comes to survival and cold weather horror. It's not something, again, that revolutionized the genre for me, but if you enjoy a fast-paced survival story, this is one you might want to check out. I thought the premise was really cool, and it was just, again, a really quick page-turner of a read. Next, we have Arat, also by Christopher Golden. I try not to double up on the same author, but these two books, while they're both by the same author, actually have pretty different premises. And so within this story, there is this ship that is discovered on this mountainside in the middle of this cold weather climate. And so a group of archaeologists are brought in to investigate. And when they go inside, they find something, they possibly unleash some ancient demons, and the story goes from there. I describe this book as Indiana Jones meets a horror story, although I suppose in a way you could kind of argue that Indiana Jones has some horror elements to its movies, but this one is very fun, and again, it has a different focus on the cold weather. It's more in the background of the story. It's the fact that they are really trapped in this environment, or rather it really affects how they do their work. And of course you have the elements like pressing in on them once everything gets unleashed. So I like this one. I thought it was a fun adventure. It definitely made me want to rewatch the Indiana Jones movies, the good ones, if you know what I mean. And yeah, I would recommend it if you also love archaeology. And next up is Lucky Girl by Anne Rickett. And this is a horror novella, a very short one that follows a group of individuals that don't know each other, but they connect and meet at this diner and discover that none of them have plans for Christmas. So they agree to get together to celebrate the day. And in the UK or British tradition, they decide on the day of Christmas to go around telling Christmas stories, or specifically ghost stories. And so the story is them telling stories within the story, and it does go from there. I will admit that this one is perhaps more cozy than horrifying, and I did kind of want more from the story. It's just very short, but again, if you're looking for a horror story that is Christmassy in nature and you've read all the really big buzzy ones like Nosferatu, this is another one to pick up. You may enjoy it, and just kind of is like a cute, comforting read, something you could wrap up and stick in someone's stocking if you're looking for that. Next up, I want to talk about Winter Kill by Ragnar Jonasson, and this is the third book in a companion series, but you can start here. Although honestly, I recommend starting back at the beginning. In the story, we follow an inspector, a character that I really love, named Ari, and he is set to investigate this woman who has been found dead. It appears that she has fallen off this building, but perhaps it's not suicide, perhaps it's actually murder, and so he goes off to investigate. What I love so much about the character in this series is the fact that he's not your usual confident, tough detective character. Instead, he's very insecure. He has a lot of anxieties, and that really comes through within the stories. And so I love the character work within this last book. I find that he has grown a lot, and you really get to see who he is and how his life has changed. So again, you kind of want to start back at the beginning, but I see so many people reading the first book and not continuing on to this one. And this, in my opinion, is the best. I adore this one. It was very emotional. It was very compelling in terms of the mystery itself, still held up, and I just really loved it. So I recommend this author all the time in all of my cold weather recommendation videos, and this is my way to nudge you again to go check out this series, and in particular get to the point that you have finished and read the entire trilogy, which ends with this book, Winter Kill. Next is Cold Morning by Brenda Chapman, which is a mystery thriller and also a piece of Indigenous fiction, specifically Canadian Indigenous fiction, which always speaks well to my heart. And within the story, there is a person, a well-to-do businessman who has gone missing, and so we have the police looking for him. The story is told from different perspectives. Primarily, we follow this investigator, Stonechild, who is Indigenous themselves, so we get that perspective as they investigate the case. And within the story, you get to find out the complications of the families that are all tied to this disappearance and possible murder. And you find out the family is very messy, the dynamics are very dirty and gritty and complicated, and it's all the things that I really like in a character-driven story. I'll be honest, this is one that I read a little bit more for the Indigenous representation rather than a really crazy mystery. I was more interested in the characters than the results of the investigation, but I do recommend it if you share my love for Indigenous fiction and are looking for something that is set in the cold, as the title suggests. This is set in the dark winters of Ontario, Canada, and I definitely think that it has some cold weather feels. And finally, I want to recommend Sherlock Holmes and the Christmas Demon by James Lovegrove. And of course, this is not a book by the original author, but rather a reimagining from a new author that is putting out new books in the idea of the Sherlock Holmes universe. And in the story, we follow Sherlock and Watson as they are going off to investigate this house where this woman believes that she is haunted by this ghost. The story, as you can imagine, is set at Christmas, and so it has those elements to it. And especially I love that it has these historical British elements of the Christmas tradition, which I, as a Canadian in the modern day, am less familiar with. So I found that to be fascinating. I thought that the character work was very good. I love the banter between the characters. There's something just very cozy and familiar about the Sherlock world that I think a lot of us really love, whether you've read the short stories, the original ones, which I do recommend, they're fantastic, or if you've simply just seen the other movies or adaptations that have come along the way. It's just very familiar, and I do think that's the kind of book that is just perfect to cuddle up with around a fireplace and just read a good book. So a little bit lighter than some of the dark and messed up books I've recommended here, but I still think it's worth your time. If you're looking for a cozy mystery with a Sherlock Holmes twist, this one is pretty perfect. So that's it for this video. I would love to know of the books I talked about, which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? I'd love to hear what are your favorite books that are set during the winter or around Christmas. If I haven't read them yet, I will definitely check them out because I try to do this video every year if I can. And don't forget, you can check out more videos and more recommendations in the links down below. And if you're new to my channel and want to subscribe, I'd appreciate it. I do read a lot of horror, thriller, science fiction, and fantasy. If you want to help me out with this video, you can give me a thumbs up. You can drop a comment, even if just an emoji like a snowflake or a Christmas tree. And if you want to help me out more, you can hit that little notification bell. That way you never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.